Hey YouTube, today I wanted to talk about kind of a slump I've been in lately, and it's actually, I guess you could say, two slumps. It's kind of a summer slump and a book slump. So first off, you might notice I'm somewhere else. I'm actually at the university that I live right next door to, and I came here because part of my summer slump is I could not get myself motivated. Every day I was just watching TV shows, binging shows, and doing practically nothing, which is really bad, not only for health, but as a writer. So today I decided I was going to leave home. I was going to get out of there. I was going to come somewhere I wouldn't be so distracted, and I was going to make a YouTube video, and I'm going to write. So that's my summer slump. And part of that is because my husband just barely started working full time. And so that's a lot of hours that I'm suddenly home alone and there's no school. I'm not currently working anywhere. I am teaching English to students online, but as far as having somewhere I get up to go to, I don't have that right now, so I had to get out of the house today. So that's kind of the summer slump I've been in. And then my book slump has to do with not only not being motivated to write because of that, but also coming to a little bit of a standstill on my second book. I am up to writing, I've written 17 chapters, so I'm on chapter 18 of my second book. My first one is not out yet. I am currently working on editing that. So what I want to get into today is why I'm kind of stuck, and it has to do with the pacing of the plot in my series. And so the first book has 42 chapters, and it's got a really clear climax of the story and everything, but it's high stakes. The first book is very high stakes. And also the character arc in my first book goes from a low point to a high point. So that's book one. Low point to high point. Now, my second book, the one I'm struggling with, the character starts off as already a great character. And part of that is because if you watch my side characters tag video, I talked about Gregor was such a great character in the first book that I knew I wanted to write an entire book about him when he's older. And so book two is about Gregor. The problem is, right from the start, even in book one, because book one's about Apricot, book two's about Gregor. Right from book one, Gregor's already at a high point, and so his character arc is very stagnant, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of great stories that are written this way, and I've been doing some research into them. I found one video especially helpful, and it was basically comparing like Indiana Jones, Paddington, and Superman. And I'll link to that video, which really helped me kind of get an idea of where I want to go with it. I don't have it completely figured out though. I'll link that below. But then I also know that when I do write book three, which I'm one chapter into just for fun, because when I got stuck on book two, I decided to go into book three and work on that. Book three, the character in that book starts at a high point and drops. And so I kind of have this, if you look at the whole trilogy, it's kind of like a bottomless trapezoid at this point. So I had to stop and say, okay, Eileen, what is the point of book two? And the point of book two for me is to establish the larger world. that my characters live in. Book 1 is in a smaller part. Yeah, they do meet some other people in other places, but Book 2 has completely different civilizations, different forms of government, different social understandings between different nations and different cultures. There's different races in Book 2. And all of that was to establish the larger world to get ready for Book 3. So I can't just skip Book 2 and go to Book 3, or else there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense. And like I said before, I really want to write Gregor's story, and it also helps wrap up one of the endings of, or one of the, it helps wrap up the cliffhanger of Book 1. In fact, I set the end of Book 1 up specifically so it can flow right into Book 2. The last chapter of Book 1 and the first chapter of Book 2 are the same thing happening from different perspectives, which those people that I've read that to just find that so intriguing and like that, so I want to keep that. I don't want to get rid of that. But this stagnation here has been so hard. And the other hard part about it, you might see this ship here. I have in Book 2, all of the characters are together on a ship, whereas Book 1, there were 3 parties and they're in different places in the world, and I kind of skip between them kind of thing. And now I've got them all on this ship, and I'm trying to figure out what conflicts I can create to help character growth, to establish relationships, to make it so that by the end of this book, you know that this crew is a crew that works together, that can use the relationships they've created to face things, or maybe even have some people rebel, that sort of stuff, just character development. So I've had them have to face sirens and storms and oceanic currents that they had to get out of because it started pushing them the wrong way. And I just, after all of these conflicts, and damages and repairs and a stowaway and all of this stuff. So I've had them face that. They went to another country. They realized that, our land isn't the only way to do, our customs aren't the only way to do stuff. And now they're on their way to the next place. And I don't want it to just be every chapter, something goes wrong, they figure it out, they fix it. Something goes wrong, they figure it out, they fix it. Because that's very repetitive. That is kind of how my first book goes, but in that one, each thing gets more and more intense. It's the rising action. But in Book 2, I feel like it's always the same stakes. And it's just so frustrating for me because I am trying to figure out, how do I fix that? How do I make the stakes larger? How do I make this a really important thing for the story? So one thing I did is I talked to my husband. We were on a road trip. I talked to my husband about it in the car, and we basically went beat for beat what I want out of this trilogy. And why I have Book 2. And then we started getting into the smaller plot details of how do I keep this character relationships, intercharacter relationships, growing when they're not changing location and they're not always facing different things. And he suggested that perhaps I could introduce some sort of sea monster that's chasing them. So there is that idea, and I do kind of like that because it's an ongoing thing, but it's the same problem, which means that every time they face it, stakes could get higher, because maybe the first time the monster will just be curious, and then the next time it'll be hungry. I don't know. I'm sort of just winging this. I don't have a script for this video, but there is that. And then what that video that I linked below talks about is when you have a stagnant character, to have the other characters around that character grow as a result of that character already being good. And I really like this idea because the crew on my ship does have a lot to learn about the world around them. They do belong to a nation that is very closed-minded, and as they're out experiencing, they're the first explorers that this nation has ever sent out. As they're out exploring and discovering the larger world, they're like, oh crap, we've done stuff to these people in the past, and it was written out of our history, and that's why we don't know about them, and that's why we don't talk to them. And they're finding that there is a lot to learn in the way they treat disabilities, in the way they treat other races and stuff. And that also goes back to a theme in the first book of how people with magic were treated and persecuted to the point of them leaving. So that's where I think I'm going with this. But then the other problem is the climax of this second book still isn't as high as stakes as the first book. Now the third book will be much higher stakes than the first book, but the second one is sort of mellow compared to everything else. But then again, the third book doesn't make sense without the without the second book. Each of them work as a standalone novel, but if you were to go from first to third, you would be like, wait, what are all of these places I've never heard of? So dealing with the end stakes being lower than the first book, that's a hard thing. If you have a suggestion for dealing with that, please let me know. I want to learn. You guys, two heads are better than one. With social media and YouTube, I can get lots of heads together. So please, please, please let me know how I can raise the stakes of the second book, even though they're not as high as the first book. The first book had like world, not ending per se, but like civilization ending high stakes. And the second book is like, will the bad guy get away sort of thing, and like possibly the stakes of the tragic death of one of the characters. So like I said, it's not as high of stakes. Let me know what you would do, and let's get out of this summer slump if you're in one as well, and let's get writing. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell icon below, and have a great day. Bye!